브리핑을 시작하겠습니다. 먼저 최강욱 교수님이 말씀 있겠습니다.
를 마련할 것과 양측의 관심사인 관세, 비관세 조치, 경제안보, 투자협력, 통화정책 등 4개 분야를 중심으로 논의해 나가는데
Start with the last trade war, because last time it was pretty clear when there was a US tariff, especially on China, then we saw the Chinese yuan weakening, we saw the Korean won weakening, and all the Asian currencies basically fell along. But this time it was very different because, as a lot of you might have read from the news, like what happened in April, despite the US threw out the reciprocal tariff, I think what's interesting is market finally had enough of all these policies under Trump or from the US going forward. So maybe they actually start to doubt the US status and the US dollar status. Like, is the US dollar still credible going forward? Maybe not. But very interestingly, because what happened was during last month or so, market was selling the dollar despite being risk off, despite having the tariff. So this time with the news, when market is relieved, actually we saw the opposite. The dollar actually rallied broadly, especially against the major currencies. Euro, yen, only the yuan rallied a little bit, just because it has been under pressure. But if you look at the rest of the Asian currencies, basically it tracked the major currencies like euro and yen. So for example, the Korean won actually dropped, Taiwan dollar dropped, and other Asian currencies dropped. But that's because despite of a risk-on environment, market now actually was relieved that the US was not that radical. So they're stepping a step back from doubting the US, so the US dollar benefit. So we saw a big contrast compared to this time and what happened last time. So whether they can catch up or act right, there are many things behind it have to facilitate. I think the key concern, like when the US administration, so meaning like Trump himself, when he's concerned about currency, it's always because about the trade deficit. So therefore, maybe one of the requirement, or at least market thought one of the requirement for the US to have a trade deal is to have all these trade partners, especially Asian economies, to strengthen their currency. The FX element itself is always a bargaining chip for correcting the trade deficit in the US, trade surplus in South Korea's mindset. But what's more important, I think, it's really how to correct that. For example, like, will South Korea buy more from the US or export less to the US? And also, even more importantly, is whether South Korea, say companies like Samsung and the others, will they invest or build factories in the US? That's the ultimate goal of President Trump and his administration. Actually, FX is just a byproduct. That's very unlikely. But the current context is very different compared to the Plaza Accord in 1985. Because back then, really, the parties that are talking are really the major industrial economies. So US, Japan, obviously, and like Canada. So those major economies, at the end of the day, they're in the same group. So they have very close relationship.
그 대신 할 수 있는 방안들은 특히 이제 아시아 쪽에서 봤을 때는 이제 한국 같은 경우는 만약에 미국이 대만 또는 중국과 환율에 대해서 어느 정도 협의를 이뤄가지고 중국 같은 경우에는 정부에서 통화를 관리를 하고 있잖아요. 그 부분을 어느 정도 강세로 전환을 하고 대만에서도 상당히 정부에서 중앙은행에서 관리를 하고 있거든요. 그렇기 때문에 그런 통화들을 어느 정도 약세 쪽으로 가도록 협약을 하게 되면은 한국 통화는 거기에 연동이 돼가지고 약세로 갈 가능성이 되게 높습니다. 예, 왜냐하면은 한국 이 원화 시장이 그냥 외환시장에서는 프락시 통화라고 그래가지고 위안화에 대한 수요라든지 대만 달러에 대한 수요가 있을 때 원화를 통해 가지고 거래를 많이 하거든요. 만약에 미국 정부가 지금처럼 뭐 그 관세 정책을 통해 가지고 다른 국가들과의 어떤 무역을 좀 더 어렵게 하고 그리고 또 좀 더 더 나아가서는 어떤 글로벌 어떤 서플라이 체인에서의 분절화가 이루어진다면은 아마 미국의 어떤 그 달러 기축통화로서의 달러의 지위도 약화될 수밖에 없거든요. 이제 그거까지 미국은 원하진 않을 거예요. 그렇기 때문에 어디까지 압박을 해야 되는 것이고 그리고 어디까지 달러를 절하시켜야 되는 것인지에 대해서 상당히 고민이 많을 거라고 생각해요.
I think at least for the near term, but going forward, it will have to break this new normal and appreciate. We have an in-house model. We think the fair value for dollar Korean won is actually around 1250. So there's a large gap. And South Korean won is one of the most undervalued currency within Asia, according to our model, even compared to Taiwan dollar and other currencies.
You mentioned 1250. And could you give me some details about this number, or how did you calculate or formula of this number? Because the other day, one analyst said that 1350 would be fair, and I think there's a lot of gap between the numbers. So
it's a very simple regression model with very simple macro inputs, including like inflation differential, rate differential, like terms of trade and investment differential, something like that. So same for all the economies. We're not saying that the won should appreciate right away to 1250, but I mean the trend is quite clear, especially even though we have a more peaceful period now with all the trade troughs and even trade deals.
결국에서 미국에서 가장 필요로 하는 것들은 미국으로의 투자 그리고 미국의 경상수지 적자를 줄여줄 수 있는 방안을 가져오는 걸 원하는 것 같아요. 결국에는 우리가 수출을 줄이는 건 안 된다고 생각하거든요. 수출은 계속 많이 하고 수입을 늘리는 방안을 고려하는 게 중요하다고 생각해요. 그래서 LNG의 수입을 좀 더 수입을 많이 하고 아니면은 사우디처럼 항공기라든지 또는 무기 수입을 생각할 수 있을 거고요.
It's quite clear because we saw from China. So the best for each, not just Asian economy, any economy is just to focus on your own interests and focus internal. So that's the same for South Korea as well. Now we're still waiting for a deal, but eventually, I mean, you can't give in too much. That's the art of having a trade deal. Like to some extent, you have to protect your own interests. So I think just focus domestically. If you need stimulus, you can keep cutting rates, keep providing fiscal stimulus, keep doing the structural reforms on different fronts. Then eventually that will do you good.